over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ravan. Okay, thanks for stepping in spontaneously. Yeah, very happy to announce the final panel of this 3-day event. I'm very happy in particular because I have to can hand over to my dear colleague Aurelie Beauvais, who is working with me at SolarPower Europe and is our policy director. So Aurelie is probably the best person to talk about this topic. There's no one in Brussels actually who knows better the policy implications on solar in general, on the supply, but also on the demand side. And since we will talk about how the market for PV will look as part of the energy transition, I'm very happy to have Aurelie now moderate this distinguished panel with also two of the largest PV developers in Europe. Aurelie, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for the invitation. It's going to be indeed an interesting discussion. I mean, for this third day of the conference, to focus also with our colleagues here on the role of centralized and distributed PV in the European energy transition. You are right to say that we are also at a pivotal moment currently in Brussels and in the phase of EU policy making. There is a big legislative package on the way, as maybe most of you know, which should be published mid-July. And this package is also looking very much at how to improve the contribution of centralized and distributed PV, but also how to support R&D in the areas where it could be the most promising. There are a lot of Green Deal calls, Horizon 2020 call or Horizon Europe calls, which are going to be covering those aspects. And so this is why also we think the conversation today is particularly relevant. I'm very happy also to introduce my panelists for today. So Eduardo Roman from Tecnalia, Stijn Scheerlinck from Engie, Andrea Canino from Enel Green Power, and Paul Grunow from PI Berlin. So hi to all of you, and thank you for attending this conversation. I will try to keep an eye on the chat if there are questions from the audience. But as a start, I think we already have also a lot of elements to discuss. And maybe I will start already with my first question to all of you. We have 30 minutes ahead of us for a discussion. So maybe Eduardo, starting with you, and all of you, please complement afterwards. I mean, when we discuss centralized and decentralized, I think it's also very useful always to get everyone's vision on the role they play in general. That's the title of the event, but that's also a good framing question for our next discussion. I mean, do you see a role more for one or the other? And what would be the reasons for that? Or do you see a role for both? And what would be the benefits to grasp?
Thank you, Aurelie, for the question. Well, I see ecosystems of both. It will depend a lot on the country, on the conditions, weather conditions. So there will be more countries with more large-scale PV plants, centralized systems, more with decentralized rooftop PV systems. So the benefits, I think, for each of these type of PV they are very clear. For large scale, I think the LCOE is the most important. So in Southern Europe countries, I think is the number one. So it provides the cheapest electricity nowadays. So large scale, I mean, in Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal, south of France, very short times of deployment. So we can achieve 1 gigawatt of PV in very short time, in less than 1 year. So it's a huge advantage. Even this capacity of adaptation to different surfaces, areas, uses. So and in the case of distributed PV, I think the most important advantage in this case is that is a very good tool for the self-consumption, and especially for the electrification of the building sector. for in the urban sector. So I think is the best tool for achieving this.
Thank you, Eduardo. Paul, maybe going to you then. I mean, I think indeed, when we look at large scale, one of the biggest arguments is really the LCOE. But do you think that would be enough? Because we also have, on the other hand, we see stronger concerns around potentially public acceptance or land use. And do you think this is something that would strike more strongly in Europe, for example, compared to other regions, if we look at large scale solar?
Indeed, I would think the acceptance problem is a problem that we have to work on. Although the centralized installations are still the driving force for putting down LCOE and compromising everything what PV needs. Yeah, that will be as a byproduct be available on the rooftops as well. But here in Germany, we have the unlucky story that the wind turbines had a huge problem in public, and of course the forces behind this are just waiting to hit on PV now, and that means PV installations are considered as large industrial areas with barbed wired fences and cameras, so looking like an industrial area that is not fitting to the landscape of regional German areas that are, on the other hand, not well developed in infrastructure and used more for holidays and leisure. And here is beyond all the technology advances we see in PV, we need just to find solutions that one can walk in a solar park and make him a solar park more than a system that sounds industrial, and that allows people to dwell there, plants to grow, and animals to live there. So that I think this is beyond the technical things, something that one can easily provide. Maybe name it agro PV, but I would say a little bit more than this. Just make it part of the existing landscape.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paul. Yes,
may I add something? I would like here to bring the Spanish case, sorry, because yes. I think it's important. I think this week the Spanish government has published a proposal for a regulation, and it will consider for the future tenders the social and economic benefits for the local communities for large-scale PV plants. So I think which is going to be the local job creation, not only during the installation but after, once the PV is installed, what happens in the future years. So everything will be considered also as a criteria for the selection of PV plants in the future tender. So I think it's a good measure, and we should go in this direction.
Thank you, Eduardo. Indeed, I think looking at innovative business models like what we call at SPE Agri-Solar, that has countless names, as well, and enhancing the collaboration with local communities, making sure that benefits are grasped is definitely a strong aspect. Another aspect which is quite in your chords, guys, actually, is also R&D. So maybe the follow-up question to you, Andrea, and then Stijn. I mean, from the R&D perspective, what can be done actually to further increase the penetration of large scale and maybe solve some of the challenges we've been touching upon, such as land use or acceptance? Andrea, would you like to start?
Yes. From the R&D point of view, I think that the best advantage that we can reach is the higher possible efficiency. So the R&D must go towards a higher efficiency, since this implied a less consumption of land. So in general, it's a benefit also for the distributed photovoltaic, because actually the requirement of space for installation can be reduced, but not only the efficiency, that is one of the parameters, but also the general energy producibility of the system. So if we are able to find a solution that maximize the energy production and the impact on of course, because you need less space, let me say, but also system like, for example, the colored modules, so that also to minimize the visual impact. So it's a question to address the R&D programs towards a direction that allow to consider acceptable to have very close to our house a quite big photovoltaic plant.
Thank you, Andrea. So efficiency in general, increasing the overall output, and maybe facilitate insertion into the landscape, which I noted. Maybe a quick follow-up, or maybe Stijn, you want to complement first, but I'd like to understand also on the efficiency side what you think can be achievable. But also, Stijn, did you have other elements R&D related which you think are relevant for the large scale business model in particular?
So thank you very much. Yes, I very much agree to what has been said. So we need both. We need distributed and large scale. And indeed, in the distributed has been said, space constraints. So we need efficiency. On the other hand, we also need the production. So flatter production curves by the technology itself, or by more advanced integration in all types of materials is really key. On the other hand, for the large scale, an element I would like to include also is that when we go to let's say a fully renewable energy system, so basically consisting of production of solar and wind, we will really need to make fit solar as part of this new energy system, in which there is, of course, production of solar, but there is also the use of the solar. We will have to integrate with multiple technologies, the coming up of electric vehicles, so energy management for not only for the local electrification, but also for system electrification is really key.
Thank you. Maybe another topic which, I mean, related to large scale, and we can close a bit this part, but an increasing concern also when it comes to EU level is really the whole topic of circularity, recyclability, and obviously when we see those huge plants which are being developed in other parts of the world, and we know those maybe master sizes, maybe not as big as in other regions like the EUAs, but we're going to have very big size of plants also here in Europe, a lot of components, a lot of panels. In terms of recyclability, I mean, how do you foresee, is it actually today a challenge from your perspective? We know we're not starting from scratch, and in terms of R&D, I mean, do you see some improvements that can be made, or interesting technologies to look at which facilitate that eventually? I don't know who would like to take it. You can raise your hand, maybe. Yes, Paul.
I mean, we face a problem. Almost of all, we have a lot of modules in our lab that need just to be discarded, and my feeling is that it's all the concepts are running. Some of them has already ended just to be operational in the market. But It's not a technical problem. I think it's more just a organizational problem. But we need just to point out that there are solutions, because everybody is just asking this, and this is lowering the acceptance in the public, of course, again.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So
well,
yes,
yeah,
Eduardo.
to say that I agree with Paul. I think from technically the issue is more or less solved. But the question is to do it. I mean, is to implement it. So nowadays the amount of materials that can be recovered from PV panels, from structures, I think is quite high. So it's close to 90, I don't know, around 90% of the materials could be recovered. So it's just a question of doing it, of these EPC companies and the projects, and to consider them in the cost and benefit analysis, and to include also what to do with the PV system at the end of the life. So, and one measure could be to make these kind of plans also obligatory, mandatory from the beginning. So we have to know what to do. What are you going to do with the PV plant after 30 years? And so I think it's a question of doing it, not so much of research that of course is necessary, but I think it's already developed.
Thank you, Eduardo.
If I may add,
yes.
Sorry, if I may add a comment, I think also that we need to address the future R&D activities also to the concept of recyclable by design. So to increase this 90% to the 100% or close to the 100% of material recovery from the PV panels, it's important to start to think from the beginning what is required to be recyclable in this sense.
I fully agree. 90% is in fact not enough. Our ambition should be much higher.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So there is broad consensus that we're not doing so bad, and we agree at SolarPower Europe. We also tend to communicate a lot on these, but yes, probably it's true also the comment that you made, Andrea, that the products were not per se made also to be reused. So we're kind of lucky that we're in a situation where we're not facing many major challenges, but maybe for the future technologies, this could be more integrated into the whole technological concept in particular. I see a question which is about LCOE, but also life cycle analysis, which also addresses the ecological attributes. So LCOE without accounting for LCA value is a half measure approach. I don't know if it's related to our specific discussion, but it actually makes sense also to look at cost only, but also the cost of CO2 emissions and to which extent this could be in the future also more factored in the LCOE. I don't know if someone wants to take this. LCOE and LCA.
Yeah, I mean, the PV is just beating other ways of energy production, and that will be used in the CO2 emission trade thing. Mm-hmm. But it's still emitting CO2 clearly, because we have just to convert CO2 into SE, so silicon, and that needs in the end needs also a solution, but it's not the low-hanging fruit at the moment, I think. All my colleagues have just mentioned efficiency is still key, and I agree. Efficiency will grow, and it is diluting everything, even the CO2 emissions, the cost mostly. My just to skip beyond the question, my idea would also be just to have better or just to exploit the potential that we have the inverter technology. The inverter would be able just to have a better look at the modules in the field on the rooftop, but the inverter industry is not so, let's say, pushed in this direction. Yeah, I'm just looking at what is about the degradation of the module, what is about module failure. At PI, we're doing a lot of electroluminescence that cannot be, where we cannot use the inverter as a biasing tool. And I think the module level electronics, they're just looking at power optimization, but our customers, they're looking at costs and degradation rates. Yeah, that is key. Can be that there is more need or more push coming from the centralized PV owners, because everything is big and even small percentages are then important, and it's less important for rooftop. But in reality, also the house owner is interested to have a better look at the modules, and what the module does is still somehow a secret because it's captured in a string, and one can guess. I mean, PI is doing a lot in this terms, but we see that's the customers, they have, let's say, yeah, they have a problem.
Yeah, we also see a stronger demand from industrial consumers, at least corporates in general, which tend to go much beyond the only notion of cost and also ask for extra elements to be valued, notably on the rooftop segment, whether it is CO2, looking at where it was produced, and also human rights standards. And that's becoming also interesting for the rooftop segment, which is probably going to be exposed at EO level to an energy labeling or eco-label system in the future. So which will also be ranked according to its performance, including environmental, for to help driving consumers. So that should come somewhere in 2023. Probably 2023, 2024. Going into the rooftop segment as well, I see there is a hand up, so I feel bad not taking it. But on the other hand, then Thorstein, I would ask you to be very brief, if that is a question to our panel.
It was the comment to the LCOE/LCA discussion. Overall level, it's not. If you do LCA assessment, then it's not very difficult to do an assessment of the life cycle emission costs and add that to the LCOE. But the big picture is that you actually need to do this for all kinds of electricity generation technologies. And that will be, in the end, an advantage for solar, because solar would be then among the lowest emitting technologies. So I think we should embrace the concept of adding a life cycle emission costs to the LCOE for solar, because that would make this technology even more competitive. So that was my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Thorstein. And that's interesting for me, at least, to hear that, because it's true that in the overall discussion on large-scale solar, and especially with the focus on hydrogen, because one thing which we maybe did not mention on the contribution of large-scale solar is that obviously in the whole hydrogen debate, it's becoming one of the key drivers for renewable hydrogen production. And there was for some time this rumor roaming around the corridors in Brussels that the CO2 footprint of large-scale solar could be higher than expected, also looking at the fact that most of the components would be produced outside of Europe, sometimes in highly CO2 intensive regions, and adding also the CO2 aspects of the transport. And so it triggered quite an interesting discussion on this specific aspect. Are we truly the most competitive on CO2 aspects if we look at the whole value chain? And so is there indeed a need to re-anchor partly, manufacturing in order to address this CO2 aspect, or to improve further our processes at the upstream level in order not to be penalized for this in the future? But that's interesting to hear that in this fora, at least, this point doesn't seem to be identified as a potential or strong barrier.
I mean, it's a good point, but the more electricity that is produced by PV, that would lead us to less CO2 intensive PV production in the end, because CO2 emission is just global, yeah. And the transport problem, I hope that PV comes back to Europe, of course. Even if it's the Chinese that bring it back, I would just support it, yeah. I mean, the transport is the thing that when we speak about PV, the main title is we're producing electricity where you need it, and it should also hold just for producing PV itself, that we produce PV where it is installed. Transport is something that I guess combines well with modern economic theories, and that we get global for any reason. Yeah, we don't ask for the reason, we do. Global is good, but that will go, I think at a certain point that will turn back. Why do we need to transport everything? Yeah.
So indeed, I think, as you said, I mean, it's more local sourcing. It's not who, it's where. And I think there is a global understanding that we will need to start sourcing more locally also to address this CO2 footprint. For large scale, it looks quite obvious. For small scale, and that's a nice transition. I know there was another panel on R&D, on industrial strategy, but maybe a question for you also, Andrea, and the others, because one thing we've seen at SolarPower Europe, looking at distributed PV in particular, it seems to us from the gut feeling that also when it comes to re-anchoring manufacturing, and here maybe also increasing the share of European companies in the overall manufacturing, distributed seems to be a more interesting segment. And why? Because it would be less correlated or bundled with the LCOE race, because it is anyway more expensive, and maybe because consumers would be looking at other aspects. Would you maybe agree with that, Andrea? I mean, also because I know you've been involved a lot in the Catania factory.
Yes, actually the rooftop market is an interesting framework, because as you said, it's less correlated to the big investment required for a big solar field. So since it's actually is a single people decision to realize a small plant, it's something that is let me say transversal in some way. So everyone can decide on itself. But actually, as you said before, the question of the eco-label can be very important in this point, because as Europe, we should address the decision of consumers towards something that globally, if we sum all the contribution of a single user, must be in some way aligned with the objective that we are talking about. So the reduction of CO2 footprint, the global advantages to have distributed photovoltaics. If we don't address in some way also the consumers towards this good direction, the risk is that if consider, if I well remember, there is more or less the projection is to have half and half of the next 50 gigawatt installed in Europe, so 25 gigawatt in large scale application and 25 gigawatt in a rooftop application. So actually the impact will be almost the same. So if we don't address very well the consumers towards the good direction, similar global vision to the one that we have for a larger PV plant, actually the impact could be very bad. So I think that we need to give the elements to people to decide in this direction.
Aurelie, may I add?
Yes.
Just for the rooftop or the decentralized systems, of course, the cost maybe is less important than in large-scale PV plants, and this is one reason. And also because there are other aspects important, energy management, how to integrate the electricity produced by PV in the buildings or in the cities, together with the other uses of electricity, heating, cooling, air conditioning, electrical vehicles, and so on. So this integration is important. Of course, thinking in the citizens, the aesthetics, the flexibility of design, shapes, colors. There are many other reasons apart from the cost that are important, and this is maybe one of the reasons because why we are thinking in Europe for this specific sector.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what Stijn was mentioning earlier. Indeed, I don't know if you would like to complement.
Yeah, indeed I agree. So solar is really a key to locally produce carbon free, and then it will be valuable even more when you have the ways to manage that energy locally. By combination, indeed, by the increasing fleet of electric vehicles for example, for all kind of activity on industrial sites, you will think of people coming in with their cars and having a charge, and there are solutions to manage that without too much exploding, let's say, the infrastructure to do so. It's really a question of management. But also flexibility in the industrial processes. There is certainly flexibility that can be activated in function of the available energy that is also produced locally. So there are ways to encourage people, industries, communities to really valorize that locally produced electricity by solar.
Thank you. That's indeed also the vision which we've had at SolarPower Europe, also to look at the very specific contribution also of distributed when it comes to system integration at local level. I mean, smart cities, smart mobility, smart buildings, and it's also interesting also linking with the industrial strategy once again, because I mean, inverters obviously are also a centerpiece. We often call it the brain of the system, and this is also an area where production in Europe remains stronger, as well as innovation, and we've also seen I mean, there are different innovations and R&D aspects in centralized or distributed, but it's true that for distributed, the whole system integration part is really a very interesting driver and a powerful driver in the future. And for large scale now, with the whole hydrogen, it also has inserted this whole new dimension as well of system integration, but via Power to X with a stronger focus on large scale installations. Well, we could continue this conversation endlessly, but we're already above time. So maybe quickly, as I had asked you to prepare a little closing question, and if I'm allowed by my dear Michael, I will just ask you to answer very quickly, because we may have some colleagues also from the EU, from the Commission, listening to us today. We have a big package, the Fit for 55, coming our way, and one of the roles is really to unlock also the contribution of both centralized and decentralized. And I think what's great is now that the Commission, in its proposals, its bold proposals, I think acknowledges very much also the need for both. So to all of you, if you had two key wish for the upcoming legislative package, which I would take with me and bring to the EU, most likely, what would it be? And I will follow just the order of the cameras as they appear, and starting with Eduardo.
Well, I know that it's not possible, but I will ask for PV being mandatory in every new building that is going to be arising in the future, as it has been proposed at local level, at municipality level. This is for distributed systems, and for large scale, following my arguments, I will ask also to include this local impact in these large scale projects.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Andrea.
I will ask to have a strong commitment, global commitment towards the renewable energies, and also a dissemination of the information. It's I think that it's very important to involve everyone in the mechanism of energy transition. So both from the distributed point of view and from the concentrated point of view, but we need information and involvement of people. So it's very, very important that the mission is shared among all of us, and not only an abstract concept, let me say.
Mm-hmm. Yes, noted. Thank you. I mean, important also the transversality, all stakeholders up to the citizen, which many times has no clue what we're doing right now. Paul.
I have do-it-yourself PV systems for the rooftop, or might be not the rooftop then, because we have a huge lack of craftsmen in Germany as a limiting factor for the decentralized. And I obviously would ask for the combination of hydrogen with centralized PV,
mm-hmm.
also in Germany, not only somewhere in the south.
Thank you, Paul. So only renewable hydrogen is what I will take.
Yes.
Thank you. Stijn?
Yes, so well, we go to a very fundamental transformation, in fact, of the energy system. So make solar fit at the distributed level as well as the decentralized level on all levels. This is indeed social acceptance, new business models with farmers, for example, for agri photovoltaics. On the one hand, but also on the other hand, electrically valorize the complementarity with wind, support self-consumption, and the management, in fact, of that energy, because we will have energy, we will have too much energy at some points, too few at other points. Make sure that this can all work in a fully renewable system.
Thank you. So a call also to broaden the scope with wind and storage. Thanks a lot to all of you for your participation, for being active and reactive, and for your very nice insights. I very much enjoyed the discussion. I hope our audience did as well. And now, yes, just have to hand over to my dear colleague, Michael Schmeller, for the closing remarks.
Thanks, Aurelie. Wonderful panel. When I can say after a conference that I have learned a lot, I'm happy, and I'm very happy today. Over the last 3 days, we saw presentations and discussions providing us really great insights on, that's meeting the title, What's Hot in European Solar R&D, spanning from HJT, which is starting to get traction in the market, to next gen hybrid PV modules with very high efficiency of potential of over 30%, as well as advancements in BOS. So great. There was apparently also quite some interest in European solar R&D results we were able to spark with this event. So if I look at the numbers, we had nearly 850 registrations for this event, and at peak times around 400 people dialed in. My key takeaways from this event, first, we still have world-leading solar R&D in Europe. That's great news. And this is obviously a key for the solar manufacturing renaissance. SolarPower Europe, together with you and many others, are working on. But we need, and I think this is what we also discussed today, also R&D, also for the demand side of the coin. So Professor Christoph Balif yesterday referred to SolarPower Europe's 100% Renewable Europe study, which we published last year, and where we modeled a Paris compatible leadership scenario, which simply said that we need 250 gigawatts of annual installations per year for the coming decades. That's over 10 times of what's being installed today. And this year we will have over 20 gigawatts, which will be more than 22, which will be a new record in the EU to the once heydays in 2011-12. In any case, what we also learned, and I think nobody knows that better than Aurelie, we need higher awareness and more support from policymakers. And that's what SolarPower Europe is working for every day in Brussels. So if you're not a member yet, and I know most of you, at least everyone on the panel, and many of the consortia and the projects are, but if you're not, please consider joining. So once again, thanks to the 4 projects, our co-organizers, GoPV, HighLite, HiPERION, and SuperPV. It was a super event from my point of view, and I hope you enjoyed it as well, the audience too. Big thanks also to the team at TaiyangNews in India, China, and Europe for making that happening. And thanks again for joining, and see you back in August for the TaiyangNews Reliable Module Design Conference. That's when we will launch our market survey on encapsulation and backsheets. See you then again, and have a nice day. Thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.